let's go ahead and dive into some professional development for marketers. So I always like to start some of these conversations off by talking a little bit about why we should care about this. Why does this matter, regardless of how long you've been in marketing, regardless of what type of marketing you do, what business you're doing it on behalf of. I think professional development, personal development, learning in some capacity is incredibly important to all different types of marketers. So let's unpack that a little bit of why this is important, why we're having this conversation today. For one, marketing is always changing. It is an ever-evolving market, especially because it involves so much technology. At GreenMellen, we do a lot of digital marketing, so that's obviously incredibly dependent on technology and how fickle and constantly changing websites can be, email marketing can be, social media platforms can be. There is always going to be a level of change and evolution that's happening with all marketing. So because it's such a dynamic industry, we have to constantly be keeping on top of all of those trends and the latest things, and just to stay sharp. Because I certainly believe that there are principles that are always going to be applicable to marketing, that there are going to be things and skills that you're always going to be able to go back to, and that's nice, and you can always build on those. But to really fully understand how to apply them, especially on lots of different platforms and different venues and different audience expectations, you simply have to continue to learn. So that's one reason why I believe it's incredibly important. I don't really think that there are any true experts out there. I think there are people who know maybe a little bit more than us, and we can always learn from those people. But I think, if you're never going to reach the mountaintop. In other words, you're never going to get to a place where you okay, cool, I get it. Social media marketing, I've got it down. I can move on now because I know everything. There's never going to be one of those cases, right? So I definitely believe there are people we can learn from, other people we can kind of trade ideas with within marketing, but there's never any place where you're going to kind of have finally arrived and know everything. So that kind of goes back to the first point we talked about, that marketing is incredibly dynamic and changing, and so we have to evolve and adapt and change with it, because we're never going to get to the place where we're the expert or the know-it-all. And then the third and final point that I wanted to make is that it really helps to be well-rounded when it comes to marketing. Even if you are pretty proficient when it comes to one area, maybe you're an email marketing expert, or you think you are, it really still helps to know how to do maybe a little bit of web development and maybe a little bit of copywriting and maybe some of those things that bump up against it, because essentially any marketing skill, one, can be developed, and two, is going to be related to another marketing skill. There's going to be some other way that you can get better at managing this platform by also understanding how to do this type of marketing. That you can get better at social media marketing if you're also know a little bit about maybe PR and influencer marketing. So you can be a generalist in many things. There's a lot of different aspects of marketing. So understand a little bit of all of that, and then get really deep in a few things that you feel like you're really, really good at. So that's basically being both a generalist and a specialist, which I really like this illustration that shows that how to be a T-shaped marketer, or really, this can apply to anything even beyond just marketing. But if you have a few things that you're really deep at and really specialized in, and then lots of things that just a little bit about, that helps you kind of be a T-shaped marketer that's pretty well-rounded and that can understand a good bit of a lot of different things. So that's kind of how I've always tried to shape my own professional development, is by getting deeper in a few things and getting wider in a lot more things. So hopefully that makes sense. I also, so as we go through this, I'm going to run through, I've got quite a bit of material to cover here, but that doesn't mean we can't stop and have conversations along the way if we want to. So feel free to chime in, maybe raise your hand and ask a question. We are definitely going to have time for kind of questions and answer and discussion. Definitely want to get into that at the end, but feel free to raise your hand and stop me if there are any questions along the way. So the rest of the kind of conversation, or the prepared, I guess, material from here is all about specific different areas of professional development. So obviously you can see the first one here, but we're going to kind of be unpacking a few different styles and different approaches to how to learn things and how to get better as a marketer. So I'm going to go through those one by one, and then again, we can have some time for Q&A at the end. So this is perhaps my favorite, is reading books. It's not a surprising one, but I think if we read more as marketers or any professionals, we're going to be more educated and more well-rounded. I think books are probably the most undervalued resource out there. If you were to sit down with someone who wrote a book, who's an author, who's an expert in a subject or field, and you sat down with them for 5 or 6 hours and they told you everything that they knew about a certain subject, they would probably charge you a few $1,000s for that, kind of close time. But you're kind of getting a very similar experience by reading a book, because somebody is pouring in all their thought and knowledge and care that they know about a subject into a book. And it takes them hours and hours and hours to write and design and publish that book. And you're able to get it for like $15 to $20 and consume all that content over and over again, but usually over the course of a few hours than it takes you to read a book. So I truly believe that reading books is one of the most undervalued leadership skills in marketing and in even beyond that in general business. So I really encourage people to read books for professional development. And I could probably do an entire other presentation on just the books that I would recommend, because I'm a voracious reader. But when it comes to marketing specifically, here are the 4 books that I would recommend starting with. You guys may have heard or read some of these books, or maybe none of them, and maybe these are completely new that you might want to check out. So Seth Godin has written several books about marketing. This Is Marketing is a great place to start, though. Ray Edwards is a phenomenal copywriter, and this is one of the best books on writing copy, especially writing copy around sales that I've ever read. It's fantastic. Donald Miller has likewise written several books about marketing. This is a good intro to kind of his, the story brand style of marketing. And then Read to Lead is actually a book co-written by a guy that I know. And it's all about basically how you can use books and reading to build leadership development. So those are 4 initial books that I think anyone on this call could learn something from or appreciate.
Hey, Robert, are there any other books?
Yes. Oh, way to tee me up. Yes, because there is one more that I might recommend. Again, it shows that I really like writing and I know what it takes to write a book, because I just actually published one last week about storytelling and how you can use stories for your marketing and your business. So a little shameless plug for my book that I just wrote. Yeah, if you're going to read one of them, you might want to make it this one, so you can definitely find out more about the book that I wrote here. But we don't need to dwell on that. I think it speaks for itself. It's an excellent read, I think. One last thought on reading and books is that I believe you can expand your definition of what it takes to read a book. You don't necessarily have to read the entire thing. You can kind of skim it. There are, obviously great things like ebooks and audiobooks that some people are like, well, that doesn't really count. Well, you get to decide what counts when it comes to reading a book. As long as you are getting something from it, as long as you're getting enjoyment and education from it, you can listen to a little bit of an audiobook at 2 times speed. It doesn't matter. You need to find what works for you and not stick to one kind of pure definition of reading. So make sure that you enjoy the books that you're picking out. Hopefully occasionally, maybe you read a nonfiction book that's a little bit more educational, and then pick out a fun book that you really want to read. And that kind of, because if all you read is stuff that's drudgery, you're probably going to get burned out and not want to keep doing it. And so I always encourage people to also read for learning and for pleasure, so that you are able to kind of, to keep your enjoyment up of it. So that is a quick overview. Again, I feel like I could talk about this subject alone for an entire presentation, but that's a pretty good overview of how you can, as a marketer, use books and reading to grow yourself. Another very closely related subject is podcasts. I assume that almost everyone on here at least knows what a podcast is, probably listens to a podcast, whether you do it regularly or if you only listen to select ones. Podcasts are the in thing for content marketing right now, unsurprisingly. And one of the reasons is because they're so easy to consume. You can do it just about anywhere you are. And I typically do it in the car or while walking or something like that. So I think podcasts are phenomenal, and they're definitely not going away. I've wondered for a couple of years when they're going to stop being as trendy as they are, because for a couple of years there, it seemed like everybody and their mom had to have a podcast, and that's still kind of the case. One of the reasons, though, I think that trend has sustained so well is exactly what I said before. It's so easy to consume. There's such a wide variety of podcasts. There's so many apps that you can listen to. It's directly within your smartphone, so you usually have one, access to those podcasts on you at all times. So just that accessibility of the podcasts and the value of the content that you're able to get depending on which podcast you listen to. So again, different people have different opinions on them, but I think there's a lot of value that just about anybody can find from them. Again, certainly within the field of marketing. If you want some more recommendations, because I tried to weave recommendations specifically within each of these different examples, but here are 3 different shows that I personally really enjoy and I feel like have a good overlap when it comes to marketing. Work Life is by one of my favorite authors, Adam Grant, he's an organizational psychologist. So it's kind of about how business works and how companies can build culture and work together and all those sort of things. Hidden Brain is kind of a psychological, kind of cognitive podcast. So I feel very smart when I listen to it because it's very kind of highbrow and lots of great things that you learn from it. And then John Acuff is another author and speaker that I really like. And his is all around how do you build goals? How do you motivate yourself to achieve things? How do you get more performance out of yourself? So these kind of all work around, they're not all marketing specific, but they kind of work around all those different things like organizations and goals and all those things that I think any marketer can benefit from. So, hopefully you listen to a couple podcasts, and if you are looking for more recommendations and have a bunch of spare time in your hands, consider checking out one of these podcasts. And because we had a bonus book before, let's do a bonus podcast now. Because Mickey and I have a podcast as well where we talk about a lot of things like this, especially digital marketing and how you can do marketing for your business and promotions and all that kind of stuff. We have new episodes every week, and we've put out about 25 to 30 episodes so far and counting. So yeah, feel free to check out our podcast as well if you haven't already. And then the last tip on here for podcasting is that I think just like reading, that listening is a really important skill that everybody should learn and practice. So I think one of the best things that you can do to actually gain more out of, and this is true for any of these tips, but if you put action to any of the things that you're doing, if you actually put it into practice, if you take notes when you're listening to a podcast, if you pick out that one practical action step that you can do and then actually put it into practice later, that's going to help that idea stick a lot more. And it's going to help you remember it and actually maybe even share it with others later. So I think active listening to podcasts is a really key way to get more out of the podcast you're listening to. So another unsurprising one, I think, I don't know if any of these topics that are coming up to people are surprising. I mean, I know you've all heard of books and podcasts before, and certainly conferences as well. But I'm trying to help remind you of what all these things are and maybe kind of help you look at them in a slightly different way. But yeah, conferences is another unsurprisingly very popular one when it comes to professional development for marketers. And I think one of the reasons why, because obviously we have lots of online, kind of webinars and conversations and meetups like this one. But what's the difference when you actually go to a live event, an in-person conference? And I think one of the biggest things is you get like this huge boost of energy. You're around a lot of people. You see all the sponsors. You maybe get some swag. You have the opportunity to do networking, which isn't always as exciting for, again, an introvert like myself. But it's a whole experience. And there's obviously professional development that's built in and involved there. But there's a lot of other things that are kind of involved as well. And it just gives you this really nice breath of fresh air. Usually you're stepping out of the office and you're going into this new place and being around just the energy of a lot of people. And so that's one of the things that I enjoy about conferences when I get to go kind of every once in a while. But yeah, that's one of the things that I think a reason that a lot of people like to go to those as well. Here are 3 different marketing conferences. I mean, there are countless out there, but 3 that I think are some of the most popular and some of the most well-known. I've actually only been to the Digital Summit, but I tend to go about every year. Obviously, they have the location here in Atlanta, but they also, I think they have about a dozen other locations across the US, and I think maybe even international. I know DigiMarcon is another one of those kind of regional ones where they have locations again across the US, and I think they have a couple international conferences as well. And then Inbound Marketing Conference is one that's put on by HubSpot, which is obviously a pretty well-known marketing software platform. So those are 3 of, again, the most well-known marketing conferences that are about kind of general things. You can find specific different kind of niche things within marketing, but those tend to cover the kind of the broad gamut of digital marketing and all the different subjects that can include. So maybe check out one of those conferences to attend in 2023. And then finally, one last kind of thought on attending a conference or going to a live event is, again, before you go, because it can be very overwhelming when you go to a big conference center and there's hundreds or maybe thousands of people that are attending, is to think about what you want to do beforehand. So maybe look at all the different breakouts or webinars or specific things that you might want to attend. So you're picking the right ones there. Stay focused on the things that you want to get out of it. I usually, again, love taking notes when I'm at a conference so that I can, you usually will forget all the great things that you learned a day or 2 after you get back to the office, because then real life sets in and you've actually got to start answering emails again. So if you have notes to go back over and take a little bit of time to kind of read those through and figure out what action steps you can take from there, it really helps, again, make those ideas stick and help make sure that, again, you didn't spend 3 days at a conference and then all of it kind of fell out of your mind afterwards. Like it really helps you push that momentum forward and actually bring some of it back to the work that you're doing. Email newsletters is another one that I think people should consider when it comes to professional development. These were kind of in vogue, like maybe about 10 years ago, and they kind of slowly faded away. And I think they're kind of trending back. There's, over the past couple of years, there's been a bunch of popular email newsletters that a lot of people subscribe to, and they look a little bit different than they used to, but I still think there's a lot of value that we as marketers can get out of them. So yeah, so they're coming back. I think email newsletters are on the rise. There are so many of them out there, and I definitely encourage you to not subscribe to all of them, because then you won't get anything out of any of them. But it is a really, really nice way to kind of get, different articles and different tips and different tidbits of advice, great videos to watch. That they're a great way to kind of curate all of the different great marketing content that's out there online. Again, some great suggestions on newsletters that I've subscribed to in the past that I really appreciate. Daily Carnage is, as it sounds, a daily email newsletter about marketing from another marketing agency that's out there. They have a lot of great tips and links, and it's got a really nice, clever kind of tone of voice to it. They're fun to read. Total Anarchy is by another really good author that I like. She's really big on writing, on humor, and all that kind of stuff. And she puts out I believe hers is a weekly newsletter, which I like, that kind of less frequent cadence. But she's got a really good newsletter there. And then The Hustle is another one that's I think a daily that's all about kind of the latest tech news and business news and all that. And they've got a really, really kind of cool brand to them. They're just based around this newsletter. So they're a pretty cool marketing brand and voice out there. So these are a couple that, again, if you don't subscribe to any marketing newsletters now, you certainly can check out theirs to get a lot of really great content. And as I mentioned before, there are so many out there, and even without subscribing to any email newsletters, I can wager that all of you probably have a full inbox that never quite leaves you alone. We can always have emails that are popping up far more frequently than we want them to. And so you don't want to add to that kind of sense of overwhelm. So try to pick out maybe 2 to 3 newsletters that you want to subscribe to. I again prefer less frequently, maybe weekly or monthly compared to daily, just because maybe you read every single newsletter for the first week, and then you maybe read one a week, and then you slowly start to just delete them as they come into your inbox because you just don't have the time to look at them anymore. So, and one helpful tool, if you do get to that point and you just have way too much stuff in your inbox, unroll.me is actually a really helpful tool. I believe it's free, that you connect to your inbox, whatever you use, and it'll help you unsubscribe to a bunch of the junk that you've slowly collected over the years. So make sure to keep that inbox clean. Don't overwhelm yourself, but if you do it right, you can get some really good email newsletters coming at you that'll provide a lot of really great development content. I like the terms talks and docs, different TED Talks, and then documentaries that are out there, because video is obviously a very powerful way to consume content. We've talked about reading, just text. We've talked about podcasts, which is audio, but video kind of combines all of that and really keeps people's focus and attention. And a lot of people who are visual learners really like learning from video. But again, video can also be very distracting, and it's not a great way to learn passively. Some people listen to podcasts just kind of when they're on a walk or something like that. Video kind of demands your full attention. So you've got to pick out the right, again, TED Talks or right documentaries or right videos that you want to watch to be able to absorb that content and actually have it stick. Because I am a big fan of TED Talks, I try to watch, one every once in a while, maybe slightly more often than I watch Netflix or something like that. So here are some of the 8 TED Talks that I really think are valuable to any marketer. Again, the beauty of TED Talks is that they can cover a wide range of content. So things from like psychology to design to education, motivation, storytelling, any of those type of things. So I try to kind of add a variety of different things here. Again, don't feel like you need to try to write all these down right away. You'll have access to this deck at the end of this talk, and I've linked all of these directly to each of those videos. So try to maybe check out 1 or 2 of those that stand out to you, maybe that you haven't seen already. And then I think another side of this as well that's pretty closely related, because it uses a lot of video content, are online courses. So I really try to take 1 or 2 online courses every single year to get like an official certification in one of these online platforms. And there are so many out there, both paid and free. And I think you can get value out of both. But I thought these are 3 of kind of my favorite places to look for great like online courses that are video driven. So Business Made Simple University is one by Donald Miller, whose book I mentioned before. He's the story brand guy, and he talks about story brand and a lot of different, even beyond just marketing, but a lot of different kind of business principles and practices in his courses there. Again, HubSpot is another one we mentioned, their inbound conference before, but HubSpot has a lot of great, all free video courses. You can get certifications in SEO and inbound marketing and social media marketing and on down the list. They're really, really good, and their videos are really high quality. So it takes time to walk through all of them. Their courses are a few hours long, and so it takes a month or 2 for me to sit through and actually watch all of them. And then you actually take a quiz at the end, an exam to earn a certification. But they're really, really valuable, and a lot of people earn those certifications. And then MailChimp is another really great email platform that a lot of you may have heard of, but they also have certifications now. That's obviously specifically about email marketing. But if you're interested in getting, going deeper into that niche, they have some really powerful certifications through MailChimp. And a last thought about those certifications. I think it's an easy way to kind of build some credibility. Add that to your resume, add that to your LinkedIn profile. It helps kind of you show off that you've taken the time to do professional development. It doesn't guarantee that you actually know what you're talking about, because anybody can kind of just watch the videos and take the exam and get the certification. The different platforms have different regulations when it comes to how serious they are. But if you put in the time, if you generally watching the videos, I like to take notes when I'm watching them. I like to talk about them with friends and colleagues. It really it's a lot of really valuable, rich content. And so if you take it seriously and take these online courses and certifications, then you generally can get a lot out of it, and it can mean something that again, what you're talking about when it comes to marketing. I think one of the kind of things that maybe people didn't think of, a lot of the ones we just talked about are probably ones that people commonly practice and commonly know about. But I also love to talk about mentorships, because networking and getting connected with people and building relationships is a far underrated strategy when it comes to professional development. And one of the biggest reasons is because mentors have experience, and when they see your situation and then they can tell you about, hey, it took me 10 years to realize this, but why don't you try out XYZ? It can shortcut your experience. It can get you further down the road a lot quicker because you have somebody who is already further down the road, and they can kind of help pull you along. Again, if you build a meaningful relationship with that person, if you pick out the right mentor, if you ask them the right questions, if you're invested in that relationship, and again, you find somebody who's willing to invest in you, then it can be really, really valuable. And I also believe, well, okay, pause on that for a second. I think one of the first things to talk about is finding a mentor, because that can be one of the most difficult and often stops people right there. They're like, yeah, I would love to have a mentor, but how? Where do I go to get one? I've actually been a part of a couple different mentorship programs through my university's alma mater program, through the local Chamber of Commerce. I'm doing it through the American Marketing Association now. So for those of you in Atlanta, if you want to sign up for AMA, we have a mentorship program. I know AMA also has chapters across the country. And I think they probably likely have mentorship programs. So that's a good way to just go through a professional organization rather than doing it on your own, and getting connected to people who are more experienced through that. But even regardless, even if you wanted to do it on your own, the point is to find somebody who you admire, find someone who you want to be more like, and say, God, in 10 years, I would love to be in that person's job, or in 10 years, I would like to have a resume that looks more like that person. And then just strike up a conversation and say, hey, do you have the time to maybe jump on a phone call with me once a month, or have lunch with me once a quarter, or something like that? And as long as you're direct about it, the worst thing that they can say is no. But if you ask enough people, odds are you're probably going to find somebody who has the time and the willingness to talk to you and be a mentor to you. Because I've done that same thing. I've just been bold enough to just go up to ask somebody, and they've usually said yes. And it's been, it's usually a short-term thing. Like I was with that person for 6 months or something as an official mentor or mentee. But it's usually been a really good relationship, and even someone I will keep up with in the long run as a professional connection. So those are really good ways to, again, build those professional relationships. And the point I was going to make earlier was that they're really, when you pick the right person, they're incredibly mutually beneficial. Because I've also been a mentor. I'm a mentor through the American Marketing Association right now. And I get just as much out of being a mentor as I did a mentee. Because it's really good to see kind of what people who are maybe 10 or 15 years younger than you and just starting out their career, what kind of things that they're going through and what kind of questions that they have. And obviously there's the benefit of just being able to pour back into kind of the next generation of marketing professionals. But I really think the right relationships, when you're able to find the right mentor or right mentee, the benefit goes both ways, and it can be really good from either side of the equation. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about, and I've been touching on this kind of throughout the conversation, but how do you make this stick? Once you've read the book, once you've gotten to the conference, once you've listened to 15 podcasts, how do you actually put this stuff into practice? How do you actually remember all this stuff? Because it can be a lot to absorb. It can be a lot to think through. And oftentimes it's hard to actually make it applicable in your actual day-to-day life. So making a habit is a really important thing. And not even like the practical side of things, but just the actual education, right? Hey, I'm going to read a book every month. I'm going to go to one conference every year. I'm going to listen to one podcast episode every single week. If you just kind of build those habits and keep them going over time, it becomes a lot easier not only to continue doing it, but also to actually absorb all that information, because your brain is a muscle and it just needs work over time. Because otherwise, if you go a couple years without doing anything professional development wise, anything continuing education wise, it's going to be a lot harder to get that wheel turning again. So just making it a habit and doing it regularly really, really can help you to make it easier moving forward. I've mentioned several of these pieces when I'm reading books, when I'm going to conferences, even sometimes when I'm listening to a podcast. I take notes. I physically write stuff down. You can obviously type notes as well. I mean, on your computer. I find personally that actually writing stuff down by hand just helps me to remember stuff better. Obviously, then I've got a physical record to go back to and to reference later. But just that act of writing stuff out really helps me remember it. And so find the right way that helps you to take notes and to remember information and then just start applying it. Take action as well, because again, all the stuff of going to conferences and taking notes and all those kind of things is great, but unless you're actually putting it into practice, what is it good for? And the benefit is that the more times you actually, like that one tip that you got about email marketing, or oh yeah, that new social media platform, like if you actually start practicing it and actually start bringing it into your work and into your job, it helps you internalize it and helps you do it a lot more often and a lot more easily. And then you can actually put into practice this next step, which is to share it with others. I think that's the kind of final thing that completes the loop. If you're actually doing kind of like what I'm doing now and talking about it, sharing it with a colleague, reposting it on social media, talking to other people about kind of the things that you've learned, it helps to, again, further reinforce that knowledge. It can certainly help build up your thought leadership and make people impressed by you and see how smart you are. But more importantly, it's helping you remember what you already know. It's helping to reinforce all those ideas and those tips and those tricks that you're already doing. And not only that, it can help benefit a lot of other people as well. And I think that's a worthwhile and valuable thing.